like to call to order the October 20th, 2021 Longmont Sustainability Board meeting. And could we please start with a roll call?
Yes. Jim Metcalf.
Here.
Mary Lynn.
Here.
Adam Reed.
Here.
Kay Vollmeyer is here. Robert Davidson.
Present.
And Charles Musgrave will be joining us shortly, and Kate was unable to attend today. Staff member Lisa Knobloch.
Here.
Annie Noble.
Here.
Berenice Garcia Tellez.
Here.
Tim Ellis.
Here.
Heather McIntyre is here, and Atra Nusrat.
Here.
And Aaron Fosdick is with us as well. And Councilmember Christensen. She's here.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. And Chair, you have a quorum.
Great. Wonderful. Well, so we thought that so with the land acknowledgement statement, which is the next thing on the menu, we thought it might make sense just for me to read it. If that's okay with everybody, if you have any objections. No objections, wonderful. So we acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the first peoples have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that have happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of last meeting, which I have to sit out from because I wasn't here. Would anybody like to move to approve the meetings from the minutes from the last meeting? Robert?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting as presented.
Okay. We have a second.
I will second that.
All right, all in favor?
I was not here either.
I wasn't here either.
All right, so
Oh.
two people.
So I wonder
Two
if we
people.
should wait until
Maybe.
Charles is here to approve them.
So we have a voting quorum?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we circle back to that then?
Yeah, that
Charles
would be
is here?
fine.
Wonderful. All right. So now we'd like to open up the meeting for the public invited to be heard. Each person, if you wish to speak, you will be unmuted to speak one at a time. When it's your turn to speak, please state your name and the address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes for a comment, after which we'll have to cut you off.
And Chair, I'm not
So
seeing anyone with their hand raised for that, so I think we're okay.
Okay. We're flying. Does the staff have anything they would like to bring up in terms of agenda revisions or submission of any new documents? All right, that appears to be a no. All right, so now we are on to our general business. So I'd just like to remind board members to please hold your comments and questions until the end of each presentation. So after each staff member has finished presenting, just for expediency's sake. And we're going to start, I believe, with Aaron Fosdick and Lisa Knobloch talking about Envision Longmont and sustainability plan updates.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope everybody's doing well. I have Aaron Fosdick here from our planning department, who I think some of you probably know, but we've had quite a bit of new faces on the board recently. It's been quite a while since we've had Aaron on to talk about the Envision Longmont comprehensive plan. There was a lot of engagement with this group early on when the plan was being developed back in 2015, 2016, and was a big undertaking from the planning department. And there's been some folks over the last several months that have asked about and then an update, or not an update, sorry, an update in terms of where the plan is at in around implementation and things like that, and just a little bit more information about what the Envision Longmont plan is. So Erin will be going over that. And then also we'll be chatting with you about some thoughts that we have around both of those plans are going to be kicking off an update process in 2022. I know I've mentioned the update to the sustainability plan to you all before, but we want to make sure that those plans are being updated in conjunction with each other. So we'll chat with you a bit about what our thoughts are around that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erin, and Heather, if you could pull up the presentation, that would be great.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Heather. Heather, I assume I can just cue you. Next slide.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, you can go to the next slide.
All right.
So thanks for letting me join your meeting today. As Lisa mentioned, I'm a principal planner, so I'm with the planning division, and I work closely with Lisa and her team. My group really focuses on Envision Longmont, which is the city's multimodal and comprehensive plan. We do sub-area planning, special projects, and a number of other things, but we work closely with sustainability staff on a number of items, which, I think it's a great opportunity, as Lisa mentioned, to start thinking about how we continue to strengthen the integration of our comp plan and our sustainability plan. And so Lisa and I are really excited to sort of kick off the discussion with you guys today. I'm going to give a short overview of Envision Longmont. As Lisa mentioned, we did work pretty closely with what at the time was the BEA. Since that time, you guys have changed your name. And now that we're virtual, it's hard for me to know if I've met you guys, but I'm sure that I've met some of you. And so it's nice to see you again, or nice to meet you for the first time. So as Lisa mentioned, we last updated our comp plan, which we call Envision Longmont. So I'll use that term, comprehensive plan / envision, interchangeably. Some communities call this a master plan, so you might have heard that terminology too. But we last updated our plan. Council adopted it in 2016. And so we're getting to around that 5-year mark, which is when we really do want to take a look at updating it. And we'll be kicking that off sometime next year. But what I want to do today is just provide sort of a context of what our plan currently contains and how we use it. So when we set out to update our plan, it was a very big community effort. Our last plan had the last major overhaul in 2003. And so a lot of time had passed. And for those of you who have been in Longmont for any amount of time, you know that we're a community that's changing. And so this plan, the intent of the plan update and looking at this plan and really what comp plans do in general is really help cities and communities determine where and how we want to grow. And so for Longmont, with our last update, that was a pretty big shift. And we can talk more about that if you have questions. But previous plans had really focused on outward growth and focused more on greenfield development. So development of previously undeveloped land, ag land in many cases. With this last update, we really took a more sustainable approach and thought, how can we really reorient our plan so that growth is focused more inward? We're really focused more on infill and redevelopment, focused more on growth in centers and corridors. We did this because we know our population's changing. So we used this planning effort to kind of determine how do we as a community address the needs of our changing population. We're becoming more diverse, we're aging as a community. And so there's a lot of things that go along with those types of changes and needs. We also know that it's important to continue to promote general growth and diversification of our economy. We want to make sure that we have opportunities within the city for everyone. On the heels of the flood, we also knew that resiliency and adaptation was going to be big for Longmont. And so how do we think about becoming more resilient, both in terms of natural disasters, but also in terms of economic shocks and other changes? And then finally, at the heart of really any community planning effort is how do we protect and enhance the quality of life, both for the people that are living here now, but also forward looking. This plan is really intended to look 10 to 20 years into the future. And so how do we protect and enhance quality of life for future residents as well? And so our plan is really centered on 4 components: the plan framework, which really just kind of sets the stage and explains how the plan works, what the various sections are; the policy framework, which really identifies 6 guiding principles for Longmont. at the heart of those is how Longmont becomes a sustainable and resilient community. And so the 6 guiding principles are numbered. They're not in any particular order, but together they work to really create that sustainable and resilient community. And those are livable centers, corridors, and neighborhoods, a complete, balanced, connected, and connected transportation system, housing. Sorry, you guys were over my little pie piece and I didn't want to misstate. Housing, services, amenities, and opportunities for all. Safe, healthy, and adaptable community, responsible stewardship of our resources, and job growth and economic vitality through innovation and collaboration. So those are the policies. Within that, we have a number of goals and policies related to those guiding principles. And we also have indicators, and that'll be a little bit important to remember in a second. The third part of the plan is really the growth framework. And so this is where we have our future land use plan, our future transportation network that really guides decision-making about where and what kind of development we want to see within the community. And then finally, we have our action plan that outlines implementation strategies within each of these guiding principles and sets at a high level what we're going to do over those next 10 to 20 years to get us closer to our community's vision. If you go to the next slide, Heather. And so since we have been working on this Envision Longmont plan for about 5 years, and I say we, I mean we as staff, we as city council, and we as the community, this is really an effort that everyone has a role in. I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about implementation. I'm happy to answer any questions on the growth framework or policy framework, but at this point, 5 years in, I think it's important to think about what we've done. And so our implementation section, as I just mentioned, is the last section of the plan. It's focused on a pretty detailed action plan, which specifies strategies based on the goals in the plan for each of those 6 guiding principles. And so you can see here an excerpt from the plan that are strategies related to that 5th principle of supporting responsible stewardship of our resources. Within each of these, we specify what that timing is. And so that might be near term, in the next 1 to 3 years. We specify ongoing strategies that we're going to continue to do. And we also specify longer term strategies that we know are important, but for whatever reason, we may not have started right away. We also talk about what the type of strategy is. Is it a policy or program? Is it a partnership? Is it something different? And then finally, really articulating what who the responsible party is. In most cases, that's the city. And so you can see here, not a surprise probably to you all, that when we're talking about being responsible stewards of our resources, a lot of that is coming from Public Works and Natural Resources taking the lead, but planning might be supporting that. All departments in some cases are supporting that. It could be finance. And so we try to specify what that is. Again, in most cases, it's going to be the city that's taking the lead, but particularly with some of our economic development strategies, we actually have community partners that are taking the lead and we're in more of a support role. And so you do see that throughout the plan. We have an Envision Longmont implementation team, affectionately known as the Elite. So we're all elite members. And this is really a group of folks that are, a lot of folks on this call, planning staff, but folks from all city departments that are really working on making sure that we keep our collective eye on the prize. So how are we ensuring that we are doing the things that the action plan says we're doing? Council has directed us through the adoption of this plan that we should be doing things. And so you'll see, for example, on the screen here, strategy 5-2 is develop and adopt an updated sustainability plan. So at the time, we didn't have a sustainability plan. That was one of our implementation items. Pretty broad strategy, but something that we knew was important. And so as Lisa will mention here in just a second, that was something that we did right on the heels of Envision adoption. We've done a number of other things. We've, for example, updated our zoning code. So that was a really big undertaking for planning and many other city departments that really helped us to take what we said was our vision and put it into code. So what do we want our built environment to look like over time? We've also created sub-area plans. We've created separate master plans like an enhanced multi-use corridor plan, the Main Street corridor plan. We're just getting ready to start working on a plan for the sugar mill and steam areas. And so these are all things that are called out in the action plan and that we've been working towards over the past 5 or so years. We also know that things evolve over time. So there are some things that are in those ongoing categories that we're still working on, other things that we may not yet have started and may frankly need to revisit with this plan update. And then the other piece that I'll mention is we do have indicators within our plan. And so in combination with the sustainability plan, we have a site called longmontindicators.com. You can see a little snippet of this here. And this is really where we're tracking our progress over time. This is an area where I think Lisa and I and other staff agree that there's probably some room for improvement. We have, I think, over the past several years, have a city council and frankly, a community and staff that is more supportive of data-driven decision-making, that we really want to think about how do we use data to make sure we're on the right path. And that's the intent of having indicators in our comprehensive plan. We can know if we are on the right track to meeting our stated goals and objectives. And so we monitor things like how much growth is occurring in an area of change where we really want to see the bulk of our development occurring. How much has vehicles miles traveled over the years increased or decreased? We can talk about where we want the trends to go and if we're on the right track or if we're maybe needing to do some course corrections. And so you can explore the data. I will say that we are in the process right now of updating it. So it's not 100% up to date, but poke around. You can explore both sustainability plan and Envision indicators. And if you have further questions, Lisa and I can talk a little bit more about that. And then I'll go to the next slide, Heather. And so where I'll sort of end and let Lisa pick up is talking about how Envision Longmont and the sustainability plan work together. As I mentioned, creating and adopting an updated sustainability plan was one of the main strategies in Envision Longmont. And so right on the heels of Envision, and frankly, I think even before we completely finished Envision, we worked on the sustainability plan. And for those of you who have been around a long time, you know that this wasn't something that started, in 2016. It had been in the works for a long time. But I think what you'll see as you look at the goals and you look at both plans is there is a lot of overlap, and that's not by accident. So within Envision Longmont, we've got our guiding principles, and we went over those just a second ago. Again, at the heart of those guiding principles is how we make sure Longmont is sustainable and resilient. And then you look at the sustainability plan topic areas and see some very specific overlap. For example, transportation is covered in both plans. Natural environment is covered in both plans. Housing is covered in Envision, buildings and infrastructure are covered in the sustainability plan. The one area that I'll point out is, and Lisa can talk more about this, is Envision is a little bit higher level of a document. It obviously covers a lot more topics. The sustainability plan goes into more detail, and partially that's because of the time frame that it covers. And so with the sustainability plan, we were really able to articulate what those connections were and how those topic areas and objectives and metrics really tied back to Envision. And we think that as we're going forward with this plan update in 2022, there will be the ability to sort of go back and forth both ways since we're updating the plans simultaneously. So we think there's a lot of opportunity. The plans have worked really well to support each other, and I think staff has worked really well on initiatives, and we're looking forward to your thoughts on how we kind of continue that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa to do a little bit more on the sustainability plan.
Thanks, Erin. Heather, you can go to the next slide. Great. So just reiterating a little bit, as Erin mentioned, the sustainability plan was really done on the heels as Envision Longmont was wrapping up. It was a strategy that was specifically identified in Envision, but it was also a very big push from the community for Longmont to pick back up sustainability work, which, as Erin mentioned, and I know that most of you are familiar with, there was some efforts to do a sustainability plan in the past that had gotten shelved. And so really our direction was to pick up and update and complete that plan that was started in the past. But a lot of time had passed, so quite a bit of changes were made to that plan. But we were pretty constrained in terms of our scope and our resources that were available for the sustainability plan at that time. But it was also really beneficial that Envision was wrapping up because, as Erin mentioned, they had done a ton of community outreach. There is a lot of alignment. I give Erin a ton of credit in particular for really putting sustainability and resilience at the center of the Envision Longmont process. And at the time, Envision Longmont really got a lot of credit and kudos from folks in the planning world for that work. So I give Erin a lot of credit for that. And it really set us up pretty well to do a pretty comprehensive sustainability plan, given some of the constraints that we were operating under. I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with this structure in the sustainability plan in terms of the objective and the targets and the strategies that we have detailed within each of those 10 topic areas. And I just dropped in, for example, the air quality section here. But what folks may not be familiar with, because I'm sure most of you don't just read the sustainability plan on a day-to-day basis, as staff does. I mean, Jim, I know you do, but at the beginning of each section, if you look in the plan, there is this box that says linking to Envision Longmont. And we were really intentional about building off the work that had been done and tying back to those guiding principles and goals and policies that Erin was talking about, to make sure that what we were doing was really in alignment with what Envision is trying to achieve. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. So as Erin mentioned, generally speaking, within the sustainability plan, in large part because this was the direction that we had at the time, we were really looking at things that could be accomplished within the next 5 to 10, maybe 12, 15 years. We were given a pretty short time frame. It wasn't a long-term aspirational plan that we were looking at the time. So the actions and strategies within that tend to be shorter term strategies. They're more specific. As Erin was mentioning, most of the strategies within the Envision Longmont plan are much higher level, whereas the sustainability plan really digs into some much more specific strategies. There are some that are kind of, more broad or high level, and similarly in Envision, there are some that are more specific, but generally speaking, that's how the action components of each of the plans differs. And then we did have an opportunity to look at an Envision from the sustainability standpoint, and we did identify where there are some gaps. For example, electric vehicles wasn't really identified in the Envision Longmont plan as part of the transportation, the multimodal transportation component. And as you all know, from a sustainability standpoint, that's a big focus. So we made sure to include a focus on electric vehicles. There was a very small mention about greenhouse gas reductions, but even from a sustainability standpoint, at the time that we were doing the sustainability plan, there wasn't a huge focus or opportunity to focus on climate action, but that was obviously a gap. So one of the first steps that we were able to identify and implement from the sustainability plan was to do Longmont's first greenhouse gas inventory, and that was really our first entry point into looking at, what are our greenhouse gas emissions, what are the sources, and what are the strategies that we want to look at. So we did a brief update to the sustainability plan in 2018 when the greenhouse gas inventory was completed, because we did want to integrate those additional targets and strategies that came out of that report. So we did that, but it wasn't a big undertaking, an evaluation of the entire plan itself. And as Erin mentioned, 5 years have passed since the completion of the sustainability plan. We're really, I would say, 4 years into implementation because it took a while to kind of get things going. But we are really at a good point. And the 5-year mark was what was identified in the sustainability plan as a time in which we really want to look at the whole plan itself, do an evaluation of, and take stock of where we're at in terms of our implementation. And are we on the right track? Are there things that we need to pivot and reprioritize? Are there things that may not make sense anymore for us to pursue? And so with regards to the update, there's some really key opportunities for us to better integrate equity. I think that that's something that, even though we really did work to embed that into the sustainability plan and the sustainability program, as we've talked to you all a lot about, I think we're at a different place now. And as I mentioned, we are pretty constrained in terms of our resources and our ability to do community engagement. But in the time since, we've really built up those community partnerships. We've built up our relationship, particularly with our community services department. And I think we have a big opportunity to really more explicitly
I just put it in.
integrate equity into the sustainability plan, as well as our climate action goals. So now we have the goal or the recommendations from the climate action recommendations report. We have those specific recommendations from the climate action task force, as well as the equity-based recommendations from the equitable climate action team that I think can really be used as an overlay to guide a lot of the work that we're going to be doing. We have an opportunity to update the targets that we have in the plan. Some of the targets that we've met, some of the targets have been TBD on a baseline for the last couple of years because we just really haven't had the resources to really dig into some of those targets that are more qualitative around some of the equity and the social components that I think we really want to look deeper into. And then, as Erin mentioned, with the Longmont indicators, so we also have metrics and indicators that were part of our plan, although that wasn't scoped as part of the development of the plan itself. We had to develop those afterwards. And so I really utilized, if folks, I imagine a lot of you are familiar with the STAR Communities rating system, which has since evolved, but really trying to look at what are the best practices around metrics and indicators for sustainability. And that's what you'll see in the Longmont indicators currently. However, I think there's a big opportunity to revise and revamp those metrics and indicators and really better align those across our whole organization. So what are our strategic goals as an organization as a whole? And then how does the sustainability plan and the strategies within really help meet some of those higher level goals? And then we can track performance-based metrics and indicators within different strategies and programs. So that's really what we're looking at in terms of opportunities with this update in particular. Heather, you can go to the next slide, please. And then I'll pass it back to Erin to chat for a minute about the opportunities for some collaborative efforts.
Thanks, Lisa. So I think Lisa covered a couple of these, in particular, equity, climate action, and the indicators. The other piece that we think there's a real opportunity with is there's some other city master plans and frankly, plans from some of our partners like the Longmont Economic Development Partnership that have either recently been updated or maybe in the process of being updated. So another good example would be the Parks, Recreation, and Trails Master Plan. That was last updated in 2014. I believe a budget request has been made to update that plan. So you can imagine that as community members, we don't need to go out to you 5 times and ask for your input on related things in a different way. It probably makes more sense to sort of combine these efforts and ask the community more strategic questions so that we're not confusing people, so that we're getting the best input possible, and so that we're using resources efficiently. You know, most planning efforts, for example, collect baseline data. Well, we don't need to collect the same baseline data 4 times. And so we're really starting to have conversations internally about how can we align these multiple plan updates and really create a system, so to speak, where we have a comprehensive and sustainability plan sort of at the top, and we're tying our other master plans to these. And this happens now. So if you read, for example, the Envision document, we do reference a lot of our utility plans, a lot of other master plans. We reference our economic development plan. But thinking about as those plans are updated, how can we really be strategic and overt about what these say and how they're all related in a similar way to what the sustainability plan does today. And so we think there's a real opportunity to think more strategically about this, and we're starting to have those discussions with staff. So we'd be interested in your feedback. Obviously, a lot of this is still, to be determined. We plan to kick off this project, assuming that, all the budget requests go forward. We plan to kick this off in 2022. Obviously, we would need to scope out the projects. We'd need to determine what resources we have, what we need, and what the scope of each of these updates is going to be. And then a big piece that Lisa and I have talked a lot about and definitely have not determined what that's going to be is what the format is. You know, some communities have a separate transportation master plan, a separate comp plan, a separate sustainability plan, a separate equity plan. Some communities combine those. You know, in Longmont, we recently combined with this last update our transportation master plan and our comprehensive plan. There may be an opportunity to do further, combinations. We're just not sure. And so we're looking at other examples, how other communities are approaching this, what might make sense for Longmont. Some of this might come out through our community conversations. So we don't necessarily, need to hammer that out today, but certainly if you've worked in other places, lived in other places that have a unique approach and want to share that, we'd love to hear that. As you go forward, we have some time still. If you come across something that you think is a really great example, particularly in the realm of sustainability, which I know you're all obviously interested in, shoot those ideas to Lisa and I, and we can do some further exploration. So really interested in any high level feedback that you might have today. I would envision, regardless of what format we do, what kind of, consulting team we work with, what kind of staff team we work with, this board, as well as, the Planning Commission, the Transportation Advisory Board, as well as other boards and commissions, and obviously City Council will be heavily involved in these plan updates. Any good planning effort has a very strong community engagement and inclusive, equitable community engagement approach at its center. And this will, I have no doubt, that will be really guiding us. So if you guys have questions, I think Lisa and I are happy to try to take those. If you have comments, we'd love to hear those as well. And then, I think this is really just the beginning of what is hopefully a fruitful conversation over the next several months.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we'll go on to some questions now. I saw Adam, you had your hand up. Would you like to?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Aaron and Lisa, for the presentations. Very informative and really impressive work. One thing I really liked were the indicators, and I do have one question regarding them. What happens if they reveal that one of the metrics is not on track?
Yeah, so we actually have that now. If you look at the Longmont indicators page, we have icons that are essentially thumbs up, thumbs side, thumbs down that assess how we are not on track for those meeting our targets with that. And what happens with that if we're not on track is just essentially an assessment. One, I think it's important for us to be transparent with the community and with City Council about where we're at in terms of our progress. But also that's a conversation for us to have in terms of why are we not on track and what do we need to do to get there? And is that one of the things that I'm interested in is in part of this update, are we tracking the right thing? And is that information getting us what we want to in terms of reaching some of our overarching outcomes, specifically around, things like greenhouse gas reductions? So that's a free part of the conversation. But if it really is, we're tracking the right thing and we're just not on track, we need to find out why, and we need to have a conversation around what do we need to remedy that. Sometimes that's additional resources, in which case then we have to have a conversation about what are we prioritizing because we have limited resources or limited staff capacity. So in some cases, it'll really just depend on what the specifics of that are. But I do think it's important for us to acknowledge that and be transparent about what our progress is. And that's part of why we created that dashboard in the first place, is to have that transparency and accountability to the community.
And I would add that I think at the end of the day, these indicators and metrics are really intended to be a tool. So, everything Lisa mentioned, I would echo and say that over time, there's lots of things that can influence the way that we're moving, right? The direction that we're moving. Like, COVID is a great example. Like that had some pretty big implications, for example, for travel, and so over time, what does that mean? I think we're still not sure. But if we look at, for example, our indicator on mode split, and we see that if our intent is that we are increasing the split of people that are traveling by non-single occupant vehicle, but we see that going down, then maybe there's something that we need to do to course correct. Maybe there's a policy solution, maybe there's a programming solution, maybe to Lisa's point, there's additional resources that we need to put to something to try to turn that around. And so this is really intended to be a tool for staff and decision makers and the community to have those conversations about what we need to do to change it, or what we need to do to continue progress we're making if we're going in the right direction. So I think we could look at it both ways.
I wouldn't mind following up with another question on the metrics. Sorry, Charles. Okay, thank you. I know that you had mentioned that that you want to have that you will be updating the metrics. That's part of the goal for this revamp. And I was curious what that's going to entail. I know that on the indicators, there are some things that the most recent data is, say, 2016 or 2017. And is it that you're going to try to measure more things? Is it going to try to be more regularly updated, perhaps? I was also curious if there's any chance of getting any of these indicators going back in time, just so we kind of knew what like the variability in a baseline might look like. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what's kind of encompassed in updating the metrics.
Yeah, I can start from an Envision perspective, and then Lisa can add with the sustainability plan metrics. With the indicators, we do have a lot of these that go back further because we had indicators with our last Longmont area comprehensive plan. So I can share that with you. We have a lot of them that go back even further. So we have a pretty great record. We have been working to collect current data, and we do actually have a lot of data. We just need to update it. So, you know, it's really just a resource issue, having the time to do that. And we will get around to that, hopefully sooner rather than later. And certainly, hopefully by the time we start updating the plan. We really tried during the last plan update to ensure that we were selecting things that could be obtained at least annually, that were somewhat easy to collect. You know, I don't think we wanted to create something that someone needed to have a PhD and, you know, contract and spend $50,000 a year to collect something. So we tried really hard to use metrics that the city or its partners could measure. And we did a decent job, but that obviously limits kind of what we're using and collecting. So I think with the update, I don't know that there's a goal to necessarily add a certain number or remove a certain number. I think we just want to find meaningful indicators that help us tell the story on if we're on the right track to meeting our goals and objectives. And so if the current ones are doing that, you know, we can certainly keep collecting those. Even if something doesn't stay an indicator, it doesn't necessarily mean that we won't continue tracking the data. And so some of what we track a lot more data than what you see on Longmont indicators anyway. And so we probably will continue doing that. And it's really how we take everything together. We don't typically just look at one thing and say, okay, that means this. It's looking at everything in whole. And so I think we'll need to have those conversations with staff, council, and the community and folks like you all to say, does this really tell us if we're meeting our goals, for example, on a safe, connected transportation system? Do we have the right information to make that assessment, or are we lacking in some area? And if so, how could we measure that? So that's the kind of conversation I think we'll want to have.
Yeah, I would agree with Erin. The only thing that I would add to that is that definitely it's a resource issue. It is time consuming. We do try to update that on an annual basis. Some of that data is not put out on an annual basis, or there's a significant lag time in terms of when that data becomes available. So I think particularly some of the transportation data that we track, and I know Francie's not on, but she manages all of that for our team, and she could, I'm sure, speak to you about her frustrations in terms of not knowing when the data is going to be available, or have it be a year or 2 years, sometimes later than the year that we're trying to report. So that's just a limitation. We did identify some metrics and indicators that weren't as easily obtainable as what Erin was saying. I think we did try to look for those things, but particularly in the community and equity space, those are things that are really hard to quantify from a metrics and indicators standpoint. We did try to identify some things that we thought would work, but have really run into a lot of barriers in actually putting that into action. So that's an area for me that I would really like to dig deeper into, and to see if we can find out better, what our other communities are doing, what are those meaningful metrics that Erin was saying that can really tell the story, that we can either obtain or create if we need to create, but then also have the resources in place to make sure that we can then maintain that and update that over time. And in terms of the can we look further back, we haven't. The only area we've really talked about that is with regards to our greenhouse gas emissions, because you can do backcasting with some of that, but it is really expensive and it's really limited in terms of its accuracy. Data methodologies have changed and all of that sort of stuff. There's probably some other things that we could, because as Erin was saying, they are historically available. It would just take time to track that down. That's an interesting thing for us to consider for sure as we're doing some of these updates, that is it worthwhile for us to look at some of those longer term trends. So I think we can definitely put that on in terms of the conversation for sure.
Thank you so much. Charles?
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation. It's really interesting to see how we're making progress in these different indicators and goals. I had a question. It's actually very related to what you're talking about with trends and things like this, which is, and I don't know what the local data is, but the U.S. population growth rate in last year was 0.4%, and in 2016 was 0.7%, so 75% higher. In 1993, it was 1.4%, so it was 250% higher. So we've gone, we have the current growth rate is much lower. It's 250% higher, almost 30 years ago. And that can have a dramatic effect on the demographics. For example, we have an aging population overall. And so we have a shift towards older people, an average increase in age, which can affect transportation and housing needs and schools and all kinds of things. And I wonder, is that something that, and locally, of course, that has to be de-aggregated because that's for the whole US. But do we take into account those kinds of things? Those growth rates go into exponentials, and exponentials can over time have a dramatic effect for looking, 20 years out.
Yeah, Charles, I can take a shot at that, or Board Member Musgrave. I don't know how formal you guys are at this meeting, so I apologize if.
Charles is fine, or hey, you is fine too.
I'll try not to nerd out too much on this response because I love demographics and population. We absolutely look at that. And so when we did our update beginning in 2015, we prepared a community profile that really did look at what our existing data and demographic socioeconomic trends looked like and what we thought we were kind of dealing with. So you mentioned the aging population. Colorado kind of hovers around, I think, between the third and fourth fastest growing aging population in the US. We also have historically had one of the younger populations, and that's changing, obviously. But you're right, that has a lot of implications. And so for us in Longmont, that's our fastest growing demographic. When we did our comp plan update, we estimated that our share of folks, our share of older adults was going to more than double in a 10-year period. And further, the oldest of our older adults, the growth rates are staggering, like in the hundreds of % increase, which is great news because it means we're living longer, right? But it does have implications for how and where we grow, how people travel, what types of services they need, what implications that has for our tax base as we shift from a more, retail-based to service-based economy. So there's a lot of different things that go into thinking about that. And so we will want to take a look at that again, in combination with looking at our population. We also want to take a look at our housing stock, and so doing an assessment on what types of units we have. I think if you've lived in Longmont for the past 5 years, you probably have seen a shift in maybe what kind of growth we've seen. Whereas in the 90s, maybe it was larger lot, single family detached homes. We've seen more multifamily in the past 3 to 5 years. And is that matching up with where our population's growing? So I think we do need we will need to do a check of that. Luckily, we just had a census, where all of our population and housing units were counted. And so we'll have a really great baseline from which to start. And then we'll need to check in with folks to see which are our fastest growing segments. We work closely with the school district. We work closely with the Area Agency on Aging. And so we'll want to take a look at all of that and then see, based on that demographic information and those trends, what types of changes do we want to look at in terms of our policy and growth framework.
Thank you.
Harry, I believe you're next.
Did you call on me?
I did, yes. I think you're
Okay.
next.
So I was involved with the Envision Longmont process and the community meetings, and there were a lot of concerns expressed by folks who had been involved in, and I was brand new to Longmont at that point, but there were a lot of concerns expressed with folks who had been involved in activism in city government in various ways at those meetings, that they didn't really seem inclusive. The entity that was hired to run those meetings, the consultancy, used what's called a Delphi process, where you didn't really start at ground zero and ask, what do you envision for your community? It was more things like, how do you feel about having a restaurant put next door to you? And I felt that I and everyone that I attended the meetings with, folks who are new to the community and other folks, were concerned that there was a lack of real diversity in the representation of the community. Most of the meetings were held during the day rather than in the evening, and there wasn't a diversity of low-income people there and people of color. Frankly, the meetings had a lot of white folks who seemed like we were involved in real estate and development. And some of these questions that were put out as sort of the a priori assumptions were, Longmont's going to grow by 100,000 people over X period of time. And nowhere were we asked, how much would you like Longmont to grow? And how do you think we could affect growth in Longmont? So I just wanted to express that concern and say that in updates, I and others will be looking closely at how those processes are run to hope that the city can engage a more inclusive process. Oh, and there were also concerns brought up about areas of town that were slated for sort of for smaller development focuses, like around Main Street, and those areas had a lot of low-income housing in that area, and we didn't see any indication that the folks who lived in that area had actually been asked to come, specifically asked to say, hey, how do you feel about your housing being removed? And so anyway, I had great concerns about that process, and I would like to see much more inclusive process happen in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. I realize there wasn't really a question there, but I'd like to just respond and say that I'd certainly welcome feedback as we definitely try to be inclusive and get diverse engagement. And so, we did have a lot of meetings at various times. I think for those of us that do engagement, we sort of feel like community meetings aren't necessarily the only way to get input. And so we did attend a number of community events. We had a pretty robust online presence for the first time, really, with a comp plan update, because we didn't have social media and web wasn't as prevalent in early 2000s. But we can certainly always do better. One of the ways that we really tried to engage with a number of folks is by partnering with our cultural brokers. And so we were pretty successful in reaching segments of the population and in partnering with folks, to ask culturally appropriate questions. So I guess I would push back a little and say, what was it a perfect outreach? Probably not. But we do feel like we reached a fair segment of the population. And I'm not sure exactly what meetings you attended, so I'm sorry that that was your experience, but certainly we'll attempt to do better. We can always build on our previous successes, and we've got a great team that we're able to partner with now with Lisa and her team. So we're really excited to be doing that. And certainly as we go forward, if you have specific ideas and ways that we can reach potentially more seldom heard folks, I would love to include them. We do try to go to different places in the community and meet people where they are. So this plan doesn't really call for eliminating neighborhoods or removing houses or anything like that. So I also just want to make sure that that's not the impression. This plan doesn't call for, wholesale, urban renewal in that way. It's really focused on infill and redevelopment in appropriate places.
Great. Are there any more questions? Going once? Oh, Adam.
Maybe I'll just ask a quick question. These plans are very impressive and long. Do you have any protocols in place to resolve any inconsistencies between them?
Inconsistencies between the various plans or within the plans themselves, or both?
Between the various plans.
Yeah, I mean, I think there inherently will be inconsistencies, partially because of the timing, right? Probably the easiest example that you guys will all appreciate is at the time we started doing Envision, our community wasn't maybe as comfortable talking about climate change as openly as we are today. And so I don't believe anywhere in our plan you see that terminology. I will fully expect in our next plan, now we have a greenhouse gas inventory, we've had a climate emergency, we had a climate action task force. Like, we are very focused on figuring out how to address climate change. And so I think over time, we just need to kind of continue to update the plans. There are going to be inconsistencies, but those are things we just need to, have the community, have boards and commissions point out, and then do either larger updates or even targeted updates, which is not uncommon to say, hey, there's something that has changed substantially within our community, and we might need to do a small plan update to address that. So we can certainly, council can direct staff to take a look at that. Community members can bring things up. And so there's a variety of ways we can kind of address that as we go.
The other thing that I would just add to that is I do think that that's part of the moment of opportunity that we're in terms of what Aaron was saying earlier, where there's multiple plans that are on the horizon in terms of updating. That doesn't always happen. And a lot of plans call for an update every 5 or 10 years, but when we actually have the resources and budget to do those, doesn't always follow those timelines. So I do think that we are in a good moment of opportunity to be aligning the priorities and the action within those plans, because we're able to do them and do the outreach and engagement at the same time. So I think that there will be less of those inconsistencies happening. I do think that also that we have built a lot of cross-departmental relationships, and that also really helps us in terms of making sure that we, have folks from across the organization that are at the table as part of this process, because it is hard sometimes. We're a large organization. Sometimes somebody's in one department doing something and somebody in another department doesn't know that that's happening. That's just sort of inevitable. But I think the more that we build these cross-departmental teams and the cross-departmental relationships that we have, that really helps that process. But yeah, it's definitely an issue that I think we need to make sure to have on the radar and to address.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Aaron. We really do appreciate that. I appreciate, of course, all the work you guys are doing. I think if there's no objections, before we move on to the next general business presentation, do you think we could just revisit the approval of last meeting's minutes, since Charles is here now? Charles, we did not have a quorum of people who could vote on approving the minutes because some of us missed last meeting. So if those of you who are here would like to repeat your motions, seconds, and votes, please.
Yeah, I move that we approve the minutes as presented from last month's meeting.
I will second that.
And all in favor? All right, I think we have a quorum of approvers. Is that right, Heather?
We do. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so now we can move on then to the second item of general business, where Tim Ellis is going to be doing a bring your own thermostat demonstration.
Good
Hi,
afternoon,
Tim.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good to see you all again. I think Heather's going to be pulling up my presentation.
While she's pulling that up, I just want to let y'all know that I've got to log off at 4:45. I'm really struggling with these Wednesdays lately. So you'll see me kind of disappear at 4:45, but I'm glad I could have made it for most of the meeting.
So we'll vote on your punishment later on then.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right, here we go. So LPC is currently working on a smart thermostat demonstration project that I'll be presenting on today. But first, next slide. I wanted to give a couple of updates to you all. I think earlier this year, or even maybe late last year, I presented on another demonstration project that we were starting up. It was a grid interactive efficient buildings demonstration project we were running with Habitat for Humanity. You might recall, most of you were on the call, but the project really entails working with Habitat. They're building 10 homes in 2 different locations in Longmont. And they're going to provide, what they typically provide is energy efficient, low cost housing to income qualified customers. 2 of the homes were, we expected all 10 homes constructed last year, or yes, and last year and early this year, but only 2 of the homes ended up being constructed so far, and those were at Marshall Place. We were able to get the water heater controls, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Home energy monitor in one of the homes. They have mini split HVACs, which are very energy efficient, and the 2 Marshall homes had this Pladio solar, which you can see in the image to the right. But basically, what the project was mostly geared towards a water heater control program, where we wanted to put the controls that are circled here in white that we attach to a standard electric resistance water heater, and we can monitor the water heater use and turn them off selectively. But the driving force in that is there is a very sophisticated platform package that we will use, that's our vendor has created to analyze and perform algorithms to analyze the data, so we know how much heat has gone into the water heaters, when the home typically heats, when it doesn't, and they could there's a lot of analytical data that goes into kind of monitoring that home water heater in order for us to utilize that to shave peak, or to align with high renewable generation like solar during the day, or a lot of different types of beneficial uses we can use water heaters for. And the beautiful thing about water heaters is, no one really cares when the water is heated, as long as when you turn on the shower, it's hot, right? So it's a great tool. It's like a battery. You just charge it, and folks use it, and we can control 4 to 5 kilowatts per water heater. So thousands of water heaters adds to megawatts of controllable energy use in the homes, which is really fantastic. But unfortunately, 8 of the homes are now under construction. That's good news, but it took a while for them to get there. So what we have done is we kind of put off the real kickoff of the demonstration project until they're all constructed, which we expect this winter sometime. So we're hoping to kick off the program in spring of 2022. So that's an update on that one. I guess if you have questions on that specifically, it'd be good to ask them now, because most of the presentations on the thermostat program. Okay.
Robert,
you can always ask questions later, I'm sure.
I just wanted to ask on the water heater piece, are you heating it to a higher temperature before going offline, or are you just basically putting it to a setback, and if demand increases, then you resume normal heating.
You know, that's an actual real interesting potential program where you would superheat the water and have a mixing valve in there. That way the battery becomes bigger. But right now we are just doing a standard heating to whatever the set temperature is and using it in that. We don't get as much bang per buck for the water heater, but that's something we can consider in the future. That's something that we're looking into. When I was over at Hawaiian Electric, we were going to be doing the mixing valve and superheating the tank, but you got to make sure you have the right tank in there that can go up to those temperatures safely, and have a contractor install an effective mixing valve for customers. But for this program, we're not doing that.
Holly, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, Tim, do you know about the Harmony homes up in Fort Collins, built on Harmony Road by Habitat?
I don't.
Okay, they were built a couple of years ago, and most of them have solar, and they're what's called paired homes now, duplexes, and they also have flash heaters. And I've been trying to work on my house, and flash heaters have changed a whole lot, I know, and they're better than they used to be, but I'm wondering why you're not putting flash heaters in to these homes.
Well, we couldn't base a program using instantaneous water heating because it doesn't store any hot water. This is a storage program, right? So those are not really, those don't work for this type of program because you can't preheat them or turn them off. They're just on when hot water is needed.
Okay, thank you.
They're not a technology that can fit into this type of program.
Oh, okay. All right. I understand now.
Great. Well, I think for expediency's sake, perhaps we can continue on, Tim.
All right. We won't stop at every slide. We'll just stop it. So next slide, please. Thanks. So we're also this year involved in a community solar work group. Longmont is working involved with American Public Power Association and NREL and about 7 other municipal utilities around the country. And really, it's a series of training sessions by NREL folks and consultants and other professionals in the field of community solar in ways, and it's allowing us to go through the process of all the various things we have to look at to properly design, implement, and operate a community solar project or projects. Really developing a template for other cities to work off as well. So it's been really interesting. NREL has given talks and other consultants have been giving talks. We covered project topics such as the project siting, environmental issues, and things you need to look at environmentally and land regulations, equitability, and how do you what are the options to include the low income or income qualified portion of the cities. Financing options, if you do not have the funding to build it, there are lots of different ways to finance this community solar. And there's a great model that NREL has developed called SAM. It's a system advisory model. Charles, you probably know exactly what that is. I forgot the first word of it, but it actually allows you to put in all the different details of a solar project, a community solar. They actually just developed a community solar portion of this whole set of data. They have, commercial side projects, they have utility, they have all these different types of solar and battery and other kind of projects where you can utilize the model to put a lot of different inputs on size and manufacturers and ways that are operated, and for solar, how you orient it. So there's all these inputs that you can put into the model, and it actually gives you kind of some baseline costs. You can ways to split out community segments for a community solar program. So it's a useful model that we are definitely going to take advantage of when we move into the actual design and construction phase, which we hope to do next year. We hope to do our first community solar project using one of the city properties that we actually studied during the solar feasibility study last year. So we're moving towards the end of that community solar investigation with NREL, and it should wrap up this year. So that's update on that. So now we can move on to the thermostat portion. So you guys, back one slide, please, Heather. One more. There you go. So you guys, most of you have seen this before. It's a slide that LPC uses to kind of, for each project, what the channels are that the project will be focusing on to reach our 100% renewable energy goal. And a smart thermostat program is using innovative and emerging technology, the latest thermostat types out there in the market and the platforms to manage that energy. And it's HVACs in people's homes are a distributed energy resource if we have a two-way communication and control on them. Next slide, please. So today's agenda, first I'm going to give a little discussion on the evolution of thermostats and how they correlated with the evolution of demand response programs for air conditioning. I have a slide that covers a demonstration project and what that, the size and scalability of that versus a full-scale project. Then I'm going to describe the project design that we're working on with Ecobee. Then discuss some of the benefits, stakeholder grid and city benefits. Project funding is one of the last slides, and then next steps. And you can see on the graphic on the right, this is exactly what we're trying to do with this. It's a peak load reduction program. Peak load is the most expensive energy we use, and because Platte River has to turn on peak units for short periods of time, and it's expensive to operate that way. So if we can use these types of programs to reduce peak and help us maybe align more with renewables, it helps us reach our 100% renewable goal. Next slide, please. So some of you may remember that upper left-hand corner thermostat. That's an old one. I remember that when I was growing up. Very manual, old use. You set it wherever you want it, and it just stays there, right? And on the bottom left, there is the control mechanism for the older styles air conditioning units. It was hooked right up to the the outdoor unit, and really just turned off the unit and allowed it to turn back on. That was through a radio signal. Those that were operated through. Then we evolved our thermostats into what are those programmable thermostats, which are really prevalent still out there today. Most of the thermostats are these programmable ones where you can put different temperatures for different times a day. And the demand response program that goes into these is a Zigbee operation that allows communication between the thermostat and the air conditioning unit. And today we're moving into the smart thermostat era. We have about 7,000 smart thermostats already in Longmont, and the smart thermostats use a Wi-Fi. And not only do they use a Wi-Fi to do the demand response events, but they also have the machine learning capabilities where as you program your comfort level through several days and weeks, it learns your behavior, your family's behavior, your comfort zones, and it automatically optimizes your air conditioning and heating, whatever you have it hooked up to help you eventually not have to touch the thermostat at all. And it will put you in your comfort zone throughout the day. So that is what we're going to be using for this project. Efficiency Works, our energy efficiency program, has several different kinds of smart thermostats that we already give rebates at the rebate store at Efficiency Works. So it's a great efficiency product that can also be utilized for demand response and peak reduction. Should I call on Charles, or is someone else going to do that for me? Charles has his hands up.
Well, I see both Berenice and Charles have their hands up. I'm wondering, do we want to, if these are relatively isolated, quick questions, we can do them now. Otherwise, we should probably wait until the end. But well, I think Berenice had her hand up first.
Thank you, James. I just wanted to say very quickly that I have some Longmont Latino homeowners that will be very interested in this program. So please keep me posted, because they are business owners. They are part of the Sustainable Business Program, and they have question about whether or not we offer residential programming like this. So just please keep me posted. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah, we'll go into that a little bit more as we talk about the demo project first and moving into full scale. So that's great to know, and we'll definitely keep in touch on that.
Charles?
I can wait.
You sure? Okay.
Okay, next slide, please. So here is where I want to talk about the demonstration project that we're going to operate for 1 year. We're going to work with Ecobee. You know, it's only one of the several major manufacturers, but they're the only one who actually works with small and medium-sized utilities on a demonstration scale type of project. So we are going to work with them. They estimate there are about 1,000 Ecobee smart thermostats in Longmont. They actually provide a platform to view and call demand response events. And I'll go into a little bit about that in the next slide. The costs are pretty low, but we're only going to get kilowatts of savings, not major savings, and that's what a demonstration project does. We're looking at how it operates, making sure we know how to operate it, and do analysis on making sure that it's effectively meeting our goals and our needs, and then we would roll it up to a full scale project, which would include these are the major smart thermostat manufacturers, but there are potentially others out there depending on the platform that we end up using to manage a program of full scale. But these 4 are definitely the major ones, and there are over 7,000 smart thermostats in Longmont right now, and it's growing every year. We would use a third-party energy service provider platform. I've already reached out to a few of them. There are great ones out there that have developed a software platform to bring all the data and the manufacturing data in, manage it, call events, do forecasting. They do a ton of really interesting things on their platforms. It's a higher cost, obviously, but as programs get larger, you move in full scale, you move into the megawatts of available demand response capability. Next slide, please. So here's the design we're looking at for the demonstration project. Obviously, we have the customer. One of the great things about this type of project and program is that the customer already purchased and installed their thermostat. So it's a lot of utility programs. Utility buys the product or installs it, especially the older thermostat programs. You would give a new thermostat to someone and install it, which is a larger expense. Customers involved, obviously, in the event participation, it kind of happens automatically when they sign up, and I'll explain that on the Ecobee side. And they receive incentives for enrollment and participation, and I'll cover that a little farther down as well. Ecobee, for a demonstration project, they actually have these apps that they when a customer has an Ecobee thermostat, they fill out a lot of some information online on how in order to kind of interact with the thermostat, so you can control it from anywhere. You get information about your home energy use as far as the heating and cooling. So they have a lot of interesting information on an app that Ecobee provides and maintains and developed for all their customers. And when we partner with them, they actually recruit customers in that app. So they send out a message to their customers that have Ecobee thermostats saying, hey, Longmont, you're in this area. Longmont is offering this program. There's this kind of rebate. If you want to sign up, hit this button. Boop, it's done. And that information is then sent over to us. We go through the customer list and determine if they're in our area and not, and then we accept them into the demonstration project. But for this one, it's only Ecobee thermostats. So that's important to know when we're talking about the availability in that first year for other customers and thermostats. LPC, we're going to be calling events. We're going to align the events with our system peak, which I'll go through in a few slides. You'll see how this can effectively help us do that. And we'll provide the rebates and incentives to the customer. So we kind of all are working together. We all have connections with the vendor. We have connections with the customer and vice versa. So it's a nice three-way relationship for this demonstration project. Next slide, please. Stakeholder benefits. There's economic values for all of the stakeholders in the process. Utility for LPC, we're going to have dispatchable kilowatts at a pretty low cost when you compare them to other types of programs like batteries and other things that you can use for the same purpose. Our customers already get rebates on smart thermostats through our efficiency works programs, but they'd also receive enrollment and participation incentives that I'll go through later. Device manufacturers, obviously, they sell more thermostats, so they get that economic value. And for our initial project, we're going to be paying Ecobee a platform fee, so they get that additional revenue coming in. But ultimately, for a full-scale program, you want to include as many of the major thermostat manufacturers as possible. So we would move into a third-party relationships because these third parties have contracts with each of the manufacturers, and that's the way thermostat programs work these days. It started with the Google Nests. They said, we're going to hold on to the customer. We're going to have the relationship. So we'll call the event and you can pay us to do that. So they kind of really walled in the customer for access to that, using and controlling and getting data from the thermostat. So what these energy service providers do help us with is they have individual contracts with the various thermostat manufacturers. They get all the data, they organize the data, and they have a platform to manage events and do lots of cool forecasting and things like that. So, but we don't have that. That's why it's in red here, is because that's not part of the demonstration project, but for full scale, we will definitely be moving toward that area. Next slide, please. Yeah. You may see, remember this one, I showed the same slide for the Habitat program, because really this type of program fits in just like Habitat into the grid interactive efficient buildings effort. We're going to really develop a portfolio of distributed energy resources that have these capabilities. These 4 capabilities are super important in order to reach our goals, manage our peak, and manage our grid really optimally. First of all, you want to have efficient products in people's homes. The smart thermostats, as I described before, are very efficient. They optimize HVAC to set the comfort level for the customers without turning on air conditioning when they're not home or other areas of waste. There is two-way communication through Wi-Fi. So not only does the thermostat send out information, it can receive information as well. There's analytics supported by a platform to really make these devices efficient and flexible. So the occupant gets their comfort level, but we can also, utilize it for other purposes. And it's flexible. The thermostats are flexible to help us manage our city peak load, which I said before was the most expensive load and doesn't always align well with renewable energy output. Next slide, please. And here's a perfect example. This is actually a chart taken right from the Platte River website where you can check the past 24 hours of generation every day. It's really interesting to take a look at, where you can see the different types of generation on the system throughout a 24-hour period. And what we'd use this program for is that red circle, where we would take that peak and cut it down for a few hours in order to avoid generation units from turning on, maybe if the program is large enough, but certainly cutting down our peak charges for the city peak, and we also have the coincident peak for the year. At that one day a year where we're at our highest consumption in the middle of summer at 7 o'clock, we get charged a ratchet rate for the following 3 years based on that. So this type of program, this peak cutting program, can help us in 2 different peak charges that we are assessed, and help all of our cities manage that load, because we're moving into a different realm of energy generation over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. The community benefits, as I said before, it's going to help us support our renewable energy goal, trying to get that peak down and shift. There is potential for a program like this in the future if we get enough participants to do some pre-cooling, and pre-cooling can occur at high solar times of the day. So there's ways to work this program a little bit, not only for peak, but maybe help us align more with renewable energy as well. Peak load reduction, Provides other grid support. If we're having problems on the grid, it's a way to cut load off of the grid in a very quick manner for voltage or frequency, or there's other uses of this type of program. And it supports the other actions that which the city is carrying out, including our DER implementation, of which this is one, and our other plan, sustainability plan, and our electrification plan. So as more maybe heat pumps are moving into the market, we can bring them into a program like this to help manage peak as well. So there's a lot of different ways the community can benefit from a program like this. Next slide, please. The costs for the demonstration project are, it's a pretty low cost, but you're not getting a whole heck of a lot of kilowatt hour savings, just because there are some upfront enrollment and upfront enrollment incentives we're giving out. We got to pay the same platform fee for a few customers or thousands of customers. It's a kind of a set fee. So you're losing some of the economics of it, but it's still a relatively inexpensive program to put forward to really prove out this smart thermostat concept and how it can help the city do what we need it to do for us without fully going into a program and putting a lot of assets and funding into and finding out it doesn't work for us. But this is really a proven technology. These thermostat programs have been around for decades, really. This is the newest version of them. So it's pretty well vetted in the industry. But we want to make sure it's working for us. And this next year will help us prove that out for a relatively small cost. You can see up front, there is a per device fee. We're trying to get out of those 1,000 EcoBees, we're kind of setting a target of 200 participation, a 20% participation, which is reasonable. It's, it can be aggressive, but we think we can reach those numbers for that first year. So we pay a per device fee to EcoBee as well as a platform fee. There's an incentive right up front to enroll customers. The timing of that, we're going to work out to probably right as the summer starts and we know customers are actually participating, rather than signing them up in March and then them forgetting about it and opting out of every event. We want to kind of remind them that it's important to stay in the project and the program while we need it, when we need it. So we're going to give a $50 upfront incentive at some point. And then after the summer season, if they've, as customers participate, you're giving them a $25 participation fee. And the enrollment fee is a one-time fee, but the participation fee is ongoing. Every year they'll get that $25 in the fall for participating in the summer. And there are similar incentives in Fort Collins and Poudre Valley and Excel. So all of us kind of will have similar types of incentives. And those can be tweaked and adjusted depending on how well we're able to get participation. And then we're doing some data management analysis. EcoBee puts all their information up on an API. So we're going to have an organization just come in and they already do this for other EcoBee programs. They download the data and organize it so it's easy to work with and look at and monitor and understand. And at the end of this, the summer of next year, we're going to do a EM&V, evaluation, monitoring, and verification, to not only see how the program performed, but also to try to get an understanding of how we scale it up effectively, and if it can be, and what numbers we can expect from larger participation at a full scale level. Just as the notes on the bottom, we have allocated funding for this demonstration project. And as important information is how much do we expect to get for each customer? The numbers are generally right around 1 kilowatt for peak reduction per customer. Even though a central air conditioning unit can use 5 or 6 kW, when you have a lot of different participants, you cycle the air conditioning. You don't just shut it off so people are uncomfortable. You're kind of managing that a few degrees difference. So you're kind of turning it off for 15 minutes and on for 15 minutes. So in all the different ways that the event is managed, you don't really get the full 5 or 6 kilowatts per customer. You get definitely a solid 1 kW per customer. So you think about over 25,000 central air conditioning or air conditioning customers in Longmont. And if we even get close to 50% market penetration, it's about 13 megawatts of peak reduction for this one program potentially, which is pretty significant. And it's at a cost that's much cheaper than batteries currently are and other home technologies and even commercial kind of programs that would do the same thing. Next slide, please. So our next steps is we're going to be in front of council in November 16th to give this presentation. We're going to run the program next year, customer recruitment in the springtime, and training for us on the platform. We're going to start calling events in this our summer runs from June to September. It's got 4 months. So we're going to be aligning with our system peak and calling events throughout the summer. We're going to do that verification and evaluation at the end of the summer and report back to council later in the year, and hope to roll out a full-scale program springtime of 2023. I think that's it. Yes.
Great. Well, thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. Charles, thank you for being patient. Would you like to?
All right. Thank you, Tim. That's great. I think this is a great program. It makes a lot of sense, and I fully support it. So my next comment, I'm going to say it might not sound great, but it's kind of like a little bit, in some cases, like lipstick on a pig. And the good thing is you're the lipstick. This program is the lipstick, and the current housing stock and even the houses that are being built in Longmont, the vast majority of houses being built in Longmont now are the pig. And what I mean by that, they're pigs in terms of energy consumption. They use traditional HVAC systems that use 3 times as much energy to heat and cool a house as geothermal. They're stick built. They have studs every 18 inches that are thermal bridges that allow a high heat transfer to the exterior. They don't have a lot of thermal mass, so you don't buffer the heat transfer to the environment. But the fact that we basically still built houses, with studs that was invented, next year will be 200 years. 1822 is when they were invented, and so we could do so much more if we just pushed harder on what we required for new housing. And then if you added smart thermostats on top of that, then you'd have lipstick on maybe a cute dog or something. It'd be so much better. Anyway, so I fully support the program, but I wish we did more, because those houses that are currently being approved by the city of Longmont, they're going to be here for 100 years or more, consuming way more energy than if we just used what we existing technology that's currently out there that is actually economically feasible. I mean, they have payback periods that are very, very reasonable. Anyway, I just had to say that.
That's exactly right. And, you work within the codes that are developed and changing continuously, trying to get better all the time. But there's that constant dual nature of the developers not wanting to spend the money. They don't operate the houses. What do they care, right? They want to get a nice affordable home in or whatever. And that costs a little bit extra up front, although what you're exactly right. Down the operating costs will pay for themselves really quickly, but that's not the driving force for the development community. But I think, part of the electrification program, Susan Bartlett's is working hard on that. But we're going to be taking a real close look at like heat pumps and how to affect that market. And the development community is going to be really important, a partner in that. Not only just the contractors that can install them and replace them, but putting them in the first place is where we need to go. And the whole building thing, the energy efficiency has always been such a difficult thing, and it continues. And I don't see a total full light at the end of the tunnel, but I think it's a continuous process.
Yeah, I'd love to help with that if there's an opportunity. I've studied heat pumps. I'm a chemical engineer. I've studied heat pumps for the last 25 years, and there's no reason why we're not using them except for no commitment to do it.
Right.
Thanks, Tim.
All right.
I believe Adara was next, and then Adam, Polly, and Robert.
I almost feel that my question is a bit redundant after what Charles brought in. I was just going to ask you, Tim, how are you going to be recruiting customers next year? Do you have a plan for that? I'm just wondering if we could partner with that with the SOL program.
Ecobee is going to be doing the recruitment because I have that customer connection. They can send an email, text to their customers to say, hey, do you want to participate? But, if that's not going well and we're not reaching our 200 goal, I think there are some things we can include in other communications that the city puts out. But they were pretty confident that they'd reach that number just as an initial push, because it's not very high. And if we have a nice and upfront incentive, that their experience is that you're able to recruit that number. But certainly for full scale, we're going to do a lot of marketing to get those numbers up. And the more customers you have on a program like this, the more economical it is, because the platform fees are set and other things are set. So as it grows, it becomes even less costly to operate. So yeah, it's a good point, but we're kind of leaning on, at least in the first rollout, for Ecobee to touch those customers and try to recruit them into the program. And if needed, we will definitely broaden that.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you.
Believe that Adam raised his analog hand, and then I will get to the digital hands that are also raised, but I believe Adam is next.
Yes, I actually don't have a digital hand on my Zoom program right now. Perhaps I have to update it. But anyway, I would like to say I totally agree with Charles's point, and I'll even add that I lived in a house that was very energy efficient, mostly heated and cooled with passive energy sources, and it was, or passive means, and it was quite amazing to experience that. And I do have a follow-up question with what Charles was asking regarding the cost and energy savings, Tim, for these smart meters. Do you have any sense of how they compare with, say, evaporative coolers? Because my understanding with evaporative coolers is that there's something like they use a quarter of the amount of energy, and there's something like half the amount of cost required to install one. And
right.
So I think they could be used as a pretty good baseline, at least to start.
Well, we're talking about a thermostat control versus what kind of unit the customer has in. And if they have their unit in place, it's an existing central air conditioning unit. So this really doesn't focus on trying to promote the type of unit they put in. We're just saying if you have the smart thermostat and you have this air conditioning load, that you'd be, available for this program. But that's more, I think that would be something we'd take a really closer look at with Platte River and our Efficiency Works program, if that's a technology we really want to lean into in the future. But I've heard similar things where it is a very effective. It's been around forever, but it's not really a driver of in any of the markets. It's more the standard developer installs the central AC, and then that's it. But that's not kind of where this project sits. This is an already bring your own, is like they already have everything in place. We just need to access it, control it, and have participation.
All right, Polly, I believe you are next.
Thank you. Charles, I like your analogy of the lipstick on a pig. I every time a developer, we rarely get to actually talk to developers. When they do come before us, I always ask them if they're considering putting in heat pumps, or if it's a larger piece of property, geothermal, like the Kestrel development in Louisville, which has no gas lines. And, they're not bad guys. They build things the way they've always built things. They build them with sticks of it, and because that's what they know, and that's what their business is set up about along using the same developer, the same vendors and providers that they've always used. And I think that maybe a lot of work could be done to educate people who are building new buildings, because the other problem with that is that okay, if we don't use stick built, what do we use? We could use concrete. Concrete creates a whole huge amount of environmental damage, though. We could use hempcrete, but that's also concrete with a little bit of filler. There are a lot of different things that are being created, but they sometimes they only have a livability of 50 years and then they deconstruct. Other times they're off-gassing. And so, yeah, we have a lot of work to do. Plus, there are all these homes like mine my home was built in 1941. And in many ways, it's like living in a tent. There's really, it's cinder block. There's no insulation above, very little insulation. But it's nice and cool in summer. So we have a huge amount of housing stock that was built in 1880 and previous, and it's very wasteful in terms of energy. And so to try to upgrade all of that it's gonna be a challenge. We have to think of a way to do that in an equitable way so that most people can't afford to do that themselves, and they don't really understand how they could use the city resources to help them. I think the LPC renewable energy strategy and energy efficiency works has great resources, but people don't understand it, don't know how to get to it. It's a matter of educating people, and it is a little overwhelming, but we have to try to figure out a way to have a variety of energy sources and a variety of building techniques that are less pigs, more nice dogs. Yeah. Anyway, take care.
Robert, I believe you're next.
Okay, I've got 3 quick questions very isolated to this program, so I'll try to go fast. One, it seems like this is a proven technology that's been done before with demand response. So what are the specific goals that we have in Longmont? Is it, incentive structure analysis? What around the operation we need to look at? My second question is, I'm not sure that smart thermostat owners are necessarily representative of the population at large. I think they're more financially stable, more energy conscious, more tech savvy. And so I'm curious about our thoughts for how we might scale this to the entire population and how we might take our pilot study and convert it to the full population, considering those effects. And then my third question is on the EM&V. I assume we're going to do that using the runtime data from Ecobee. And if we are, will we be able to, I think participation in this program is likely to alter behavior in a way that may change performance, and simply comparing usage or runtime on days that are not events to usage on days that are events may not tell the full story. And I'd be curious if we can get usage data or runtime data this summer in a period to allow for both comparison to days before enrollment and also to a non-event day once enrolled. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let's see. I'll go with the first question first. You gotta let me respond to them, because I'll just ramble on about the same question unless I can have distinct portions set out. So the first one, yeah, we're using this program to do exactly what you said. We want to make sure that we can get the participation levels, see what the incentive levels need to be. Just working with a platform that calls events, what kind of data sets we're going to get, how to analyze it, forecast how, and using the program itself and the success or just operation of the program to prove out that we can see this being a really effective peak reduction program. And it's, doing it small scale just makes a lot more sense over the first year, so that we're not just running into a big project and figuring out the analytics on the back end, right? If we have that runtime data, we have a vendor that can help us manage it and understand it and perform analytics on it. That way, when we move into the full scale program, we can immediately start to do different kinds of analytics, like you mentioned in the third part of the question. Unfortunately, with this demonstration, we enroll the customer first. When we let Ecobee know that they're enrolled, then they start sending data, and they send it well before the program starts, and they send it every day at the end of the day, once a day, with all these different metrics that they collect from the thermostat. So we'll have a decent amount of data before the summer season starts. And really, this initially, it doesn't really make the customer more energy efficient. If they already have a smart thermostat, hopefully the smart thermostat's doing that for them. This would be kind of adding to the operation of the grid and trying to optimize their use by just during event periods raising the temperature by 2 or 3 degrees or for a certain amount of time. And those are other things we want to analyze at the end. How many customers opted out of events because they can? And, what does that mean? How long did they stay enrolled? And who dropped out of the program? All these different things will give us a good indication on how to scale up a full scale program and what we can expect from it when we do. I think what was the middle question?
It was just a question about whether or not people who have already opted into smart thermostats and the way that they'll participate in this program are representative of the population at large.
Right. The numbers we're getting right now, they're about 7,000 smart thermostats out of 26,000 air conditioning thermostats. So it's a pretty good portion right now. The thing is with smart thermostats is they operate through Wi-Fi. So they can be uploaded through the internet and through various other mechanisms that older thermostats can't. The Zigbee goes from a thermostat and you have to collect the information in a different way. You kind of have to install a specific thermostat and collect it and operate it through that type of program. The smart thermostats are just easier, and it's where the market's going. Their cost is coming down all the time. We already offer rebates on them. So I think what you're making a good point in that when we start rolling out a full-scale program, we're going to really bump up our marketing on smart thermostats at the same time to say, hey, we want to actually have customers go into Efficiency Works, buy a smart thermostat, and enroll them in the program at the same time. They're like Xcel Energy, what they do is they, on their website to buy smart thermostats, if you enroll in the program at the same time, you get another $50 off the price. And then you get the incentives to participate. So there's mechanisms in how to design the full-scale program and align it with our already existing Efficiency Works to kind of promote more smart thermostats being purchased and installed through our own existing marketplace.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, so we have Charles and Berenice and Adam, if you're quick. We're approaching 5:11, so I don't want us to keep us go. So that'll be the order of the closing act of this.
So I have a quick question, Tim. Maybe I missed it, but the platform cost, I think, was $10,000. Is that a one-time platform cost in terms of when you, for example, expand the program? If it goes well, you don't have to pay for that? Because if not, you can imagine expanding the initial program beyond 200 so that the platform cost per house is lower.
Right. Yeah, that platform cost is the ecobee platform cost. It's an annual cost. But because they keep it up to date. They developed this. It costs a lot of money to develop that platform, and they kind of license it out. That's where they make their money, in that platform development. Going forward for full scale, we're going to go with a third-party platform, which runs anywhere from $50,000 a year up to $100,000 a year or more, depending on what vendor we select. But the good thing about those platforms is someone like a company like Energy Hub, for example, they do the thermostat program and their platform fee stays the same. And you can go up 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 customers. Platform fee will go up in inflation over the years or however it goes up. But they also have the ability, these third-party vendors, what they're providing is what Mary Lynn is real interested in, right? We want this whole virtual power plant. That's this DERMS, the Distributed Energy Resource Management System. And what those third-party vendors is they offer that. So it's the smart thermostats is just one piece of that. You get this platform, you buy that annually, you license it. You can include EVs, you can include batteries, you can include water heaters, other kinds of home energy consumption devices. The large ones, the important ones that are effectively managed, can be wrapped into that same platform. So, and used for different things on the grid. So as this develops and we include other home devices, we're going to be having various ways, not only just peak reduction, but renewable alignment, voltage control, frequency, control when we need it, if we need it. There's other benefits, and it will, as the program goes, but that platform fee is going to be kind of a baseline, a baseload cost. And the more components we add to it, the cheaper per customer and device it's going to be.
Berenice?
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm walking to get my kids from daycare. Sorry about the noise. I was just wondering, team, if it's possible for the demonstration project to have more diverse members taking this pilot, especially because I'm hearing that the audience that you are describing is most like higher, medium to higher income, and we don't know the needs for seniors or low income population or Spanish speaking households. So I was wondering if we can include some of these members of the community in the demonstration project. And I'm thinking maybe some of the ECAT members could participate.
Yeah. Well, you know, the demonstration project is really geared to those who already have Ecobee thermostats. We're kind of testing out the concept of peak load through smart thermostats, but you are exactly right. There's certain parts of the community that don't have smart thermostats, and, you know, they have either no central air conditioning or they have older thermostats. So, but for the demonstration project, the focus for us, I think, is to make sure it works for us, make sure we understand how to operate it, make sure it can cut down peak. But you know, I was going to let you know when you asked the question about small businesses, Ecobee is going to send us a list of every Ecobee customer that has a thermostat, and some of those will be small businesses too. So that's going to be real interesting to take a look at it. I think there's a huge opportunity for small business, small and even, you know, not too medium, but small to medium businesses who have HVAC that is operated through a single or multiple thermostats. That's going to be an interesting portion of a full-scale program that we're going to try to, we would include them in this initial demonstration project if they have the Ecobee thermostat. There's no reason not to. If they're willing to participate and they have that thermostat and they have that central air condition, they're good, they're good. And I think as we roll this out to a full-scale program, and there's going to be other small businesses that have other types of thermostats that we can get under control with that third-party platform, I think that's a great opportunity to wrap in small businesses with residential, because really the HVAC is very similar between those customers. So unfortunately, so the answer is, for the demonstration, we're really just reaching out to Ecobee thermostat customers just to test out the program. But in the future, as we do full scale, I think we're going to try to look at the different community types and community populations and see how we can promote, you know, energy efficient technology that can also be used as demand response technology. So I'm hoping there's going to be the opportunity to work with all members of the community, because, you know, most of us have the central air conditioning in one way or another. Multifamily, we're going to work with, you know, but we need the ability to control a thermostat. So that has to be out there first before they can enroll this particular program. But you know, it's always important to keep in mind that we're going to look at a whole portfolio of different types of programs that we can really use to meet our renewable energy goals, our sustainability goals, our equitability goals. You know, all of these goals our city has. There's a lot of different opportunities that we got to take a look at and develop. But this particular one is just a small scale, let's see how it works type of effort.
Okay, thank you. Just keep us posted when you go full scale. Thank you.
Sure.
And I think we'll finish up with Adam.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tim. I might have missed it, but I do have a quick question. Do you plan on evaluating the user's experience?
Yeah, you know, that's a great part of the end evaluation, is you can send out surveys, and Ecobee can do that because they have the customer contacts. So I fully expect that we're going to have some kind of follow-up survey for customers to see what their experience was, because that'll help drive our forecast of future participation. We can sell some of it through opt-outs and dropouts and other analytical data, but really customer opinions on the experience are going to be really beneficial if we can get them. But I fully intend to have that as part of our evaluation. I think it's really important to include that.
Great. Well, as always, thank you so much, Tim. That was very informative. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
We will now move on to other business. Is there other business?
We have none.
We have one, did you say?
None, sorry.
None. All right, that's fine. Okay, so now items from staff, and I see that there's a sustainability text, final priorities letters of support with Ottawa.
Great, thank you. I thought I was going to get missed. I didn't realize that my part was after the other business. Well, great to see you all. I'll be able to keep this pretty short because I think you're quite familiar with the Sustainability Tax Program. And I also just want to quickly take this opportunity to thank Adam, Robert, and Charles for coming along to the EV fair a couple of weekends ago and helping out in our sustainability table. So thank you all very much for that. So just quickly going through this, the information that you got in your packet is pretty comprehensive. So what I'm going to do is just give you a quick recap. What we're looking at here is the sustainability tax funded projects that we're proposing for 2022 and asking for your support behind a letter of support from the SAB that we can submit with our application to Boulder County, which I think is due November 16th, something like that. So next slide, please, Heather. So for those of you who may not be aware of the background to the sustainability tax, it was voted in by a Boulder County residents in 2016, went into effect last year. That's right, we're still in 2021, and it expires in 15 years. 16% of the tax revenue that's raised from the tax goes towards sustainability programs. And there's an annual funding cycle, and that's what we're working with, where 25% match is required from the participating municipality. And the funds for these programs are distributed through the Environmental Sustainability Matching Grant Program. So that funding mechanism existed before, and this is where the funds are being channeled through. And the allocations are determined by population size of each municipality. So if you just hit the next button, a little, Heather, yes. So for this year, Longmont is being allocated $137,965. And our 25% match comes to $34,491. So that is an increase on both last year and the previous year. We actually had $125,000 in 2020, and we saw a dip last year with, I think, about 110,000 with the COVID impact. So we have a little bump in 2022. So next slide, please, Heather. So this is just an overview of the broad categories that can be funded. And the ones that I've highlighted are the ones that the projects we're proposing fall within. So climate, sustainability planning, and commercial sector sustainability. And there is obviously overlap with the other areas like zero waste, energy and buildings. So I just want to move on to the next one. I think this is just self-explanatory. They have to have an environmental focus, essentially. So these are the different items we're looking at. So you know that we had the equity and engagement specialist in 2021 that was funded by this year's sustainability tax. Unfortunately, we lost that incumbent, I think in August. So we're going to continue, I think we're in the hiring process of getting somebody on board, and we want to be able to support that position going forward into next year. So that's the number one item. And number two, we also had the climate vulnerability and risk mapping project funded by the sustainability tax this year. And we want to build on the work completed this year into 2022. I can give you a little bit of an update on that, actually. And I don't know if Lisa's already done that in any previous meetings, but we hired RTI International as the consultant to support us in those efforts. That's a non-profit research institute that provides technical support and data analysis. So they've been collecting data over the past several months on both vulnerability metrics and exposure scenarios that can be used in the map, and they've made progress on 17 different vulnerability metrics, and we're working with 4 different exposure scenarios, which is flooding, extreme heat, extreme cold, and poor air quality. So they've done the work on those different metrics, and they're pulling together an interface that we'll be reviewing, I believe, in November. And once that's reviewed, the final product should be delivered at the end of the year. So the idea would be to build upon that work and potentially include additional exposure scenarios such as wildfire, drought, water quality, and adaptive capacity. So that's a project that we're pretty excited about and would like to continue funding. There's also a possibility to continue working with RTI in 2023. They're in the process, and I think I can say this, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, they're potentially applying for an EPA grant, a STAR grant for 2023, which is called Cumulative Health Impacts at the Intersection of Climate Change, Environmental Justice, and Vulnerable Populations. And they're looking at community-based research for solutions. So they're going to be using Longmont as a case study in that application. So we could potentially be partnering with them in 2023. So move on to the next slide, please, Heather. So the other two items for funding would be the Sustainable Business Program in partnership with PACE. That stands for Partners for a Clean Environment. That's a Boulder County program. So the Sustainable Business Program is already a partner with PACE, and we want to support their equity work in Longmont going forward into 2022. The actual details of that work is still being discussed. It's in discussion, but it's likely to include outreach and business support. So we want to continue supporting that program. And the last one is the sustainability plan update. So you heard a lot from Lisa and Erin earlier about those two plans, the Envision Longmont and sustainability plan. So we also want to support those efforts, which will be kicking in next year. So that's actually it. So we're hoping that those are supported by the SAB. And again, there's a little bit more detail in your packet, but and the letter of support is also in there. So any questions about those?
I know that, so there is a copy of the letter in our packet,
Yes.
I believe, correct? So do we need to vote on whether or not we want to accept the letter as is, and hopefully we've all had a chance to read it?
Yes,
Is
please.
that okay? So that is what we need to do. So we have maybe 12 seconds for a question if people have one. Just kidding, but just
Told you it was going to be quick.
Okay, if there are no questions, then Adam.
Just a really quick one. Is the climate mapping tool online? Or if not, when will it be online?
It's not yet, it's still in progress. And I think a draft version will be available in November, but Lisa will be able to speak more to if and when it will be available online.
Yeah, it will be once it's completed, but it's not available yet. And even staff, we haven't seen the draft version yet.
Okay, so then in terms of the business that we need to get through now, would somebody like to move to vote to approve this as written? We need a motion. I'm not sure if I can move things.
I move that we adjourn the October 20th, 2021 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting.
No, we got to vote on this first.
Vote on.
That's all right.
What are we voting on?
Yeah, we're voting on the letter of support that is in the packet that Kate signed. And so, Robert?
Sorry.
Yeah, I move that we
Sunset's
vote
coming
on our support for that letter. Yeah.
Great, as written. Is there a second?
I will second that.
All right, all in favor of supporting the letter as written in the packet? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much, Adara.
Okay, thank you.
The audio isn't working great today.
I apologize. I'm on campus and it might be the crappy on-campus internet on my end. Are there any items from the board? There's nothing listed here. All right, Polly, are there any items from council? Okay.
Yes, this is my last meeting and we're all really tired and getting hungry. So I'm not going to whine on. I'll send you all a letter, but it has been my delight to help resuscitate the sustainability plan and help found this board so that it met more than once a year. And I've been on it for 8 years and I wish you all the best. Keep up the good fight. And it's been delightful to get to know, to see all of you. Everybody's has different perspectives and we all learn from each other. And this does help the city a great deal and helps our whole community. So keep up the good fight. See you around. Bye.
Thank you, Polly.
You know, Polly, as a private citizen, you can now volunteer to be a board member. It just does
Yeah, I can, but I'm going to wait a while. I'm going to take a long road trip.
Well, thank you so much, Polly. We do appreciate it. So we have some informational attachments that are in your packet. There's nothing we need to discuss here, just to make sure that is brought to everybody's attention. And now, Charles, would you like to?
I'm not sure I want to now. I like to make a motion that we adjourn the October 20th, 2021 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it. And I got you out of here a minute early. So,
We'll miss you, Polly. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
Polly.
but
Take care,
enjoy
everyone.
enjoy well-deserved rest, Polly.